PS2 supplies drop to a trickle. Naughty Dog has a new master. And the Game Boy Advance gets competition from Korea. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine. I'm your host, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Peter. Say hi, Peter.
Hi.
As the beautiful little sound we heard insinuates, you have a new headphone, don't you?
Not only a new one, but also I have a headset right now. And this is I don't have to steer my girlfriend's headset, which she needs for work. And I think it's a pretty boost in quality, and I hope our dear listeners will value that.
Appreciate it, yes.
Appreciate, this is the word I was looking for.
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe in some kind of financial form, maybe Patreon support.
I don't know, maybe.
It would be nice.
Still working on the surround sound, and I think this headset is a good step towards that goal.
I like it. Okay. So hopefully my voice is back to normal again this week so that the terrible audio quality of last week does not have to be repeated.
Me being an echo and you being sick as hell?
Yeah, exactly. For any listener who actually suffered through the last episode, I'm sorry. I cleaned it up as best I could. Now, okay, enough of the banter. We are here today to travel back 20 years and see what was making headlines and publications dated April of 2001. But before we look at the headlines, we're going to look at one of the games that was reviewed in April of 2001 for Peter's 7 Minutes in Heaven. What game are we looking at today, Peter?
So today we are looking at Metal Slug X.
That's right, Metal Slug X. Well, more precisely, the PSX port of Metal Slug X. So, Peter, explain to me, what is Metal Slug X?
Well, Metal Slug X is a bullet hell.
No, it's not. That's not even close to the definition of a bullet hell.
No, of course it's not. Again, you play a Rambo kind of guy fighting your way through slightly racist levels.
I never thought about it that way, but you are correct. There is some real cultural insensitivity going on there in those games when you think about it.
Oh yeah. So you fight, you shoot your way through it. You get all kinds of weapons. You start out with a gun, but then you'll get a shotgun, a rocket launcher, a laser beam, whatnot, whatever gun you can imagine. You name it, it's in there, and you get a couple of vehicles. I preferred the camel. And you walk and shoot your way through the level, and you free prisoners. Mm-hmm. All of them look the same, so I think it's the Clone Wars all over again.
But this time without an Australian accent.
And you're confronted with your standard bullet
barrage, a barrage of bullets.
With a barrage of bullets, yes, shot by various kinds of enemies, such as your normal everyday soldier, helicopters, cars, some weird towers that shoot rolling exploding whatnots at you, while some guys on the top of it throwing grenades. And but to keep it real, you also get some mummies that turn you into a mummy. You have bats that throw some stuff at you that also turns you into a mummy. And yeah, this is basically the game. You run and shoot your way through ridiculous levels. And to make it even more ridiculous, the enemies are laughing at you as soon as you die, and they are shocked when you rise from the dead and kick their ass. Yeah.
You know what? That was an extremely succinct and accurate description of the Metal Slug series as a whole. So
Yeah.
very, very well done. Very well done. Okay. So, and again, for all of those listeners who'd like to see Peter play 7 minutes of Metal Slug X, the video version with commentary is up for our on our Patreon as a Patreon exclusive. So go to the show link in the show notes below, become a patron for as low as $1 a month, and laugh with us as we watch Peter die again and again.
I'm not dying again and again. Dude, it's 7 minutes of sheer success.
Yes.
Dying again and again. This is what I did in the last couple of episodes, but right now, I mean, I'm on fire. I'm going full Rambo on those dudes.
Yeah. I saw the video. Okay. Okay. And before we can turn on the time machine, we do have to check in with our good friend Ethan for the Department of Corrections.
Ethan, welcome back to the Department of Corrections.
I am the Department of Corrections.
And that's true, you are. We're looking at corrections from our March 2001 jump. So, hit me.
Well, first we hit John for his incredibly odd and totally nonsensical suggestion of adapting the Dinosaurs TV show into some freakish dual-part game. I was disturbed by that, and I hope you never, ever say that again.
I actually thought it would have been an absolutely amazing idea. Because,
you're a little twisted.
Hell yeah, I love that show. Were you not a fan of dinosaurs when it was on the air, or are you just too young to remember it properly?
Anyways, onto this one you said that I had to do, but I actually didn't really have anything to say because you pronounced Irimajiri relatively fine. You did not completely butcher it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Shiichiro Irimajiri was the president of Sega up into that period where he quit and then went back to motor things. Did he go back to Honda? I can't remember.
No, he went back to a company I never heard of before that did car parts.
Okay. Whatever it was, I think he's like the one Sega president that actually was interviewed speaking English. So he is actually someone we could potentially track down and talk to if Mr. Prince of Honda would allow us to bask in his presence.
That would be pretty cool. That would be a great interview. I've been trying to track down Japanese interviews for a long time, and it's just coming up completely empty, unfortunately.
Hayao Nakayama was an English translator in his time, but he doesn't talk to anybody. So,
Really?
Because he's kind of ashamed about what happened and all that. So you're not gonna get Hayao Nakayama. I'm just telling you that. But
sounds like a challenge. No, just kidding.
And so the last thing here, you were talking about Majestic and the general idea of an ARG that is creating a fictional universe and all that. You use the term fake news. I hate that term anyway. Regardless, because we already had several terms for that, and now there's just a dumbing down of a term that already exists, but I'm going to leave that one on the table. But the general idea, you said fake news, and it's not trying to be something that you're like really deeply believing in. It's this idea of an ARG or unfiction, as some people have started to call it. I just want to say be a little wary lumping those two together because they're very different sorts of things.
That's very true. And it was more, and I should have been a little bit more careful with my nomenclature on that one. I completely concur.
All right. That's it for March of 2001.
Sweet. Well, in that case, Ethan, thank you very much for your service, and I will see you again when we jump back 40 years to April of 1981.
Pay attention to the episode.
Excellent. See ya.
So, Carl, I think that the corrections become more and more widespread through our entire episode.
Yeah, there's the corrections just kind of seep into every aspect. It would be nice to just have them clustered into one place, but yeah, it doesn't happen that way, unfortunately. But, oh well. He did not get a Peter comment. He had a John comment last time, so hopefully we will find the Peter comment of this episode at some point, if we don't already have it. So let's turn on the time machine and head back to April of 2001.
The future is coming.
Something like that.
Nintendo's GameCube system.
We're unveiling Xbox 2001. This is a computer game.
Welcome to April of 2001. Peter, what's our first story?
Game Park enters the handheld arena.
As the Game Boy Advance, which launched in Japan in March and will be getting a summer release in North America and Europe, promises to be the new behemoth of portable gaming, new adversaries emerge. Among them, South Korea's GP32 from Game Park. This console is betting on internet downloadable games to be its ticket to fame. While it would get limited distribution in Europe, it would not get an official release in the US.
And how was it perceived in South Korea?
Well, it only got, I believe, a total of 28 titles in total. It really set on the fact that the Koreans are way ahead of everybody else in internet infrastructure at this point. So the idea of being able to download games was a huge plus. Obviously, it has the downside that you can't put additional hardware or expanded memory into the cartridges. But the cool thing with this is that it's got such a powerful processor, it ends up getting a whole giant homebrew community that makes emulators for it. So you can run old 8 and 16-bit games and all sorts of stuff, as well as DivX movie files will run on this thing.
Really?
It ends up – it really is a cult piece of hardware, and there's even an emulator to be able to play GP32 games on a PC today. Mm-hmm. So even though it's this niche product, it does have a very large and – well, I mean, it's not huge, but it is a very lively fan community.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I've never heard of it, to be honest. But at the same time, did I get that right that you couldn't put in any cartridge or, well, of course, not even disc?
No. It did have games on cartridge as well.
Oh,
but
okay.
their main focus was to try to get the online distribution going.
Okay.
That was sort of their focus.
Okay, so you have a game both on cartridge and as a downloadable game. Yeah,
although and again, I'm not an expert on the system, and I'm sure Ethan can give us some more details on this. But the real thing with it is that while they had some titles on cartridge, they had a lot of titles that were also exclusive for online. The last title for it appears, I believe, in 2004, so 3 years later. And they were really hoping, I think, to get the online marketplace for games going, which is an idea that's in the air at this point. And we'll talk about that actually in a story here in a little bit today as well. this idea of downloadable games, as we've seen multiple times already over the last few months, with websites popping up selling games online for download or making older games available for free download, and et cetera, et cetera. This is also the time of Napster just got shut down and is about to be reborn as Napster 2. Things like this, that the potential for online commerce with digital goods is such a strong idea at this point. And remember, the .com bubble is just now blowing up. It's going haywire. So it doesn't surprise me that a company is releasing hardware that they probably started designing a year or two earlier in the wake or in the middle of the bubble, with the idea that online is going to be the future.
And I mean, I think they were, well, I don't think, I know they were right, but I think they were a little bit, well, not even a little bit, way too early for that, at least for the European market.
Definitely. And the fact that this thing is hackable and that people are putting emulators and ROMs on it, I mean, it doesn't give a developer at this point the security of return on investment that they really need.
Exactly.
And like I said, in the US, it doesn't come out. The US infrastructure for this just doesn't exist yet. We're still at least 4 or 5 years out of widespread high-speed internet penetration, where you can expect the consumer group for a handheld system, the kids, to actually be able to engage with an internet connection in their device and an online purchase. That's just still too far out for a U.S. Launch, and it does come out in certain European countries, but I don't believe it comes out until like 2003, 2004. And by then, the Game Boy Advance is going to just dominate every aspect of the market. So, but it's an interesting little side note, especially after we saw the SNK handheld fail a couple months ago, and we're seeing the WonderSwan Colors basically also on its way out already. I mean, it's basically a no-starter in many regards, even though it's going to get a lot of games like Metal Slug ports and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just one of those things where at this point, Nintendo has no rivals.
Yeah, Nintendo has no rivals and no one can compete against Nintendo. I think, well, not even the PSP later on was able to somewhat be comparable to a Game Boy successor.
I mean, it carved out a niche for itself, but to really compare it number-wise with the Game Boy Advance or later on the DS would be folly. I mean, there's no comparison in the numbers. It's like a digit difference.
True that. So the coolness factor was way higher than a.
This is true. This is true. And we can talk about how awesome the PS Vita hardware was and how unfairly it was treated in the market. But at the end of the day, Nintendo had the properties, Nintendo had the titles, and even with the god-awful first Game Boy Advance screen, it was still going to be the system that prevailed.
Yeah. Talking about god-awful screens, iMode brings gaming to phones.
The rise of color screens and more capable Java implementation on cell phones is opening up gaming on the go. iMode, a new Japanese standard for data transfer, boasts, according to Edge magazine, 20 million users already, and many game publishers, including Taito, Konami, and Disney, are developing titles for the system.
You have to explain to me how iMode worked.
Basically, it's just a standard for the transfer of the game files to the phones and a standardization of these Java files that is making them compatible between devices.
Between devices. So is it like you download it from a server or phone-to-phone transfer? I really don't. I don't get the concept.
Okay, so on these old phones, and this kind of phone technology isn't going to hit Europe and North America for a couple years yet in a big way. But what they're trying to do is standardize software for phones. And Java allowed us to do that. So up until this point, phones usually had a black and white screen. If they did have any software, it was always phone dependent because the resolutions were so different from phone to phone. And what they're trying to do is create a system where you code the game once. You may have to tweak it for a slightly different resolution from device to device or a slightly different color palette. But ultimately, you have this JavaScript underneath. And when you put this game in well, you wouldn't call it an app store back then, but your cell phone provider's store. So you were buying it through the cell phone provider, the cell phone service provider. Then you knew it's going to run on my phone. And this is what iMode is. It's basically a standard for compatibility between devices.
Okay.
And it's using Java, just like Java was used as a programming language on for web browsers and websites. They're trying to use that same technology to standardize the games from device to device. Obviously, if you were doing it natively for the device, it would probably run faster and smoother. But that also means that you're limiting the market for the game, and you're going to have to reprogram the game every time you go to a different device. But the Java version means if the thing can run Java, then it'll run on the device.
Okay, got it. So, hey, was that the time of this, how would you call this? Can you remember those weird advertisements like download a ringtone or download those games?
This stuff. All the magazines I'm looking at right now, especially the European ones, the North American ones not so much, but the European ones are basically full of these ads for download like a 10-frame animation of a woman taking off her shirt, or ringtones, or small little games for your phone and stuff. That is a huge deal at this point. And the European ones at this point are basically all black and white little games. And I mean, I remember at this time reading through the magazine, seeing screenshots of the games that are showing up on these Japanese cell phones and going, wow, that's actually, it looks really good. Now, granted, the screenshots didn't tell you just how bad the animation was and how unsmooth it was and so forth, but it really showed that this was going to become ultimately a multifunctional device. That it wasn't just going to be for making phone calls or sending a text message. This was going to be an all-around device that ultimately was going to make something like a Game Boy Advance, or a Game Boy at least, obsolete as a separate device. And it's going to be a few more years before the technology in the phone is going to equal what you're getting in the dedicated handhelds.
Yeah.
But, by the time the iPhone comes around, that will have happened. And so it's sort of an interesting moment of this emerging technology and people realizing, well, if it's got a CPU and it's got a GPU, it can do anything. On it. Exactly. That's why nowadays you can play Doom on a pregnancy test. So, hey, it's all good.
Weird times, dude.
Definitely.
Weird times. But I think those guys back then, they were really looking towards the future. Other than those guys at the arcade game show in London, which disappoints.
With next-gen consoles looking as good as the software coming to arcades, game makers are going all in on luxurious cabinets and innovative controllers to grab attention. From Rodeo Fever, that has a controller shaped like bullhorns, to Kick and Kick, where you literally kick a soccer ball, arcade operators must be wondering whether these innovations are revolutionary or just fads.
I think they were just fads.
Oh, hell yes. As somebody who has kicked soccer balls in a video game.
Oh, really?
And yeah, there were two different implementations of this. I can't remember if I actually played the kick and kick game or some variation. There was one released where it was a half a soccer ball that was attached to this metal plunger device, and so you kicked it, and depending on how hard you kicked it, that determined what happened on the screen.
Oh Lord!
And then
so was it just the hardness, the hardness of your kick, or was it also like, could you give the ball some spin, some direction, some?
Not that
whatever?
I could tell. Not that I could tell.
So you could,
that may have been
you could also have pushed a button.
Probably. Cool. And I mean, similar to the first version of Street Fighter that had just a punch and a kick button, and you did light, medium, or hard punches based on how hard you hit the button.
Yeah.
It was a dumb idea. And then there was another game around this time where there was an actual soccer ball that was tethered to the arcade cabinet with a rope, and you kicked it, and there was a broad sensor on the back, so depending on which angle and with how much force, you were basically kicking penalty shots. So you could determine where you were going with the ball. It made more sense. It still was kind of an awkward experience in an arcade setting, but it made more sense than the half a ball on the metal plunger.
Hey, and how long did those things live?
The ball on the rope, quite a while. I still remember how the half a ball disintegrated probably after 6 or 7 months in the arcade, and at some point you're just kicking this piece of metal.
Oh Lord!
It wasn't a good idea. Okay, no. It wasn't. But you know, it is what it is, and the arcades are trying to figure out what they're going to do. And if you want more information about this amazing period of time in the arcade business, of course you can go and check out our still Patreon exclusive interview with coin-op veteran Kevin Hayes. And he'll tell you all about what it was like to run the largest chain of arcades around this time. So plug, link in the show notes. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, one more question to this to the story, Rodeo Fever. So you have a controller shaped like bullhorns in your hands, and that's basically it?
Basically, I think it also had force feedback, so it would buck back and forth. Exactly how much movement it had, I cannot tell you. I've only seen pictures of it. I've never actually seen the device.
I mean, this is surely a good VR thing, you know, where you sit on a bull and you have the arena on little screens right in front of your eyes. So this makes totally sense. But just having a controller being shaped like bullhorns, I mean, you can custom build that thing for yourself easily.
Yeah, I mean, it could have just been a reworked version of the bicycle handles from Paperboy, for all I know. But it's just one of those things where I have no idea how it played, but the fact that it didn't catch on probably suggests it didn't play all that well.
Mm-hmm. I have the feeling those arcade makers were out of ideas back then.
The question was, how do you get people in if you're offering essentially the same thing that's at home?
Well, by not offering the same thing being that's at home.
Something like that. But nudge, hint, transition.
Next topic. I know. GamePro highlights Namco System 246.
The latest arcade hardware based on a home system, Namco System 246, uses a slightly souped-up version of the PS2 hardware. Not only will this allow for smooth porting to the PS2, but also helps cut costs. Namco previously did the same with their System 12 hardware, which was based on the PSX, and of course Sega did this with the Dreamcast and the Saturn hardware as well.
Okay, so let me sum it up. They built a arcade cabinet that that makes it easier to port the arcade games to the home consoles, so people don't go into the arcade anymore.
It's more a fact of they're using, instead of creating their own hardware or designing their own hardware or going out and finding hardware to use in the arcade cabinet. They're just taking the console hardware. They're souping up the video a little bit so they can do a higher resolution output for the much better screens that are being used in arcade cabinets.
Yeah.
And then just making the game, and that way when they do want to port it, the code already exists and it already works with the processor. And usually what they then do is they'll add like a bunch of bonus features that weren't in the arcade version, or they'll balance the game a little bit more through with, you know, things that they learned from having it running in the arcades.
So arcades became a test station for the home console market.
Oh, yeah, definitely, because the home market was making so much more money.
Yeah.
Greg Fischbach talked about this with Acclaim, where they had the rights to port all the Midway games, and they were making all the money while Midway was, you know, making money in the arcades, but it was a pittance in comparison with what you could make selling a port of the same game to the home. And so you got a whole bunch of games like at this point, I believe it's Tekken 3, Soul Calibur 2, or Soul Calibur, and there's one other, I believe the Bloody Roar franchise that are all coming out on Namco System 246. And all the previous arcade versions of these games had also already been running on the PS1 arcade hardware. So it just makes a lot of sense. They get the hardware basically for nothing, or very, very cheaply, and the port is already ready to go. And nobody's going to bitch and moan that, oh, it doesn't look as good as in the arcade. It is the arcade.
Yeah, of course. Let's leave the arcade and move to the home console market, which we talked about more than about the arcade. Up to this point, PlayStation 2 discontent.
With shipments being cut, a relaunch in Japan where the PS2 sells for almost $100 more than in the US, and attempts to discourage retailers from promoting Xbox pre-order campaigns, Sony's favor with retail and some developers may be on the rocks. Most aren't speaking up because of the massive power the current market leader has, but with an already notoriously difficult hardware system, the question remains, will Sony be able to maintain its market leadership once Microsoft and Nintendo enter the next-gen market?
Yes.
Yeah. Mainly because of, I mean, they're going to do it with titles like Metal Gear Solid 2, and GTA 3 is really going to be what cements it for them. And while we're going to talk a little bit more about some other moves that Sony's making to ensure their future sustainability. But they've got a year head start on both Microsoft and Nintendo. Yeah. They have massive franchises coming off of the PlayStation 1. They have DVD capabilities built into the system, which is a system seller in and of itself. Yeah, they have no problems whatsoever. They will maintain it, even though up until this point, most of the games released for the PS2 have been pretty weak. There is no real killer app yet for the PS2 at this point.
Yeah.
But but this was something that really permeated all the magazines this month. Everybody's bickering about how there are shortages of the PS2 at retail, and even if good games do show up, what good is it if you can't actually get a console?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a little bit like the current console generation. I mean, the reasons behind the shortage are altogether differently, but I mean, it's the same. You have Disney consoles on the market which you can get your hands on, and also which there is no real system seller for.
Yeah, exactly. And just like back then, the PS2 was the first console that was truly backwards compatible. I mean, the Genesis was backwards compatible with the Master System if you had an adapter, but nobody really cared except in Europe about the Master System. So the PS2 being PSX backwards compatible, the DVD functionality and so forth, it really did have a value proposition even without next-gen software. And they'll have that problem worked out by the time Xbox and GameCube show up.
Yeah. Hey, talking about things no one cares about, Dreamcast is reborn as a set-top box. Sorry, but this was just, you put it there and I had to take it.
Bravo. It beautifully transitioned. The dream of the set-top box has become the Dreamcast's last stand. UK communications tech company Pace has acquired the rights to the Dreamcast hardware and is shopping around a set-top box version of it to cable operators. The box would allow for downloadable game content, internet surfing, and TiVo-like control over live broadcasts. So far, no operators have signed up, but it could give the set-top box industry the boost it needs to finally be more than a dirty movie decoder.
You always end your sentences, your stories, with sentences that I can just answer with a no. Yeah, this took way too long for what came out, but sorry. I'm really sorry. I was speaking German the entire day. I was in a workshop for the last 3 days, and we were just talking German. So
I understand. It happens. Yes. You are correct. This is going to go nowhere. No one will sign up for it. The Dreamcast hardware is just, the idea that you're going to sell downloadable games for a system that's not getting any new games doesn't make any sense. No. TiVo has already grabbed the DVR market and has a real stranglehold on it at this point. And there's really just no purpose to this system as a set-top box. And it's kind of scary that they're still trying to do the set-top box. That had been a dream a couple years before already, that, we're going to get away from the PC. We're not going to have this childish console. We're going to have, the black box on top of the TV set that does it all. And,
this is what differentiates them from Atari. They had their dream and they followed through no matter what.
Well, Pace is doing it. Sega has basically already been like, yeah, if you guys want to do this, fine and dandy. We don't care.
Exactly.
They're already off onto bigger and better things, and they're developing games for all the new systems. So, yeah, it's like I think Pace just saw this and were like, hey, the technology exists. There's a user base. If we can pull off a few sales, all good.
Yeah. And
no sales emerged, unfortunately.
Talking about no sales emerging, Nuon is out.
Nuon.
It really flows.
The Nuon.
But other than that, it really flows today.
Yeah, totally. The transition was very nice. I like that. As we talked about back in our January 2000 jump, the Nuon system enhanced DVD players were on the horizon, and now Edge magazine in the UK has reviewed the tech. And yeah, it's a DVD player that can play some games, but won't compete with the next-gen consoles. Will consumers accept it as a media device separate from consoles? Will consoles remain niche enough to let Nuon succeed?
And again, no.
Exactly.
However, I think, when I remember, I was 11 years by then, and when I remember those days, there were a lot of crap consoles on the market or console-like products that no one cares about anymore today, but they really wanted to get into the market back then.
They really did. We've talked about the In-Dream or eDream or whatever it was called. Curiously enough, last month we talked about how that was dead. And this month in Next Generation magazine, they still have a big profile on the company. Printing schedules got in the way there. But the problem here is that everybody is thinking consoles are this niche thing for kids. And the console isn't going to appeal to an adult audience. Yeah. And these people just don't get it. especially as the PS2 the PSX already became the system for the slightly older audience. And the PlayStation 2 is going to take that to a whole new level. I mean, GTA 3 is the game for adults. And GTA becomes the biggest selling game in the world. So it's just this idea that, and they literally talk about it as, consoles are this niche product. DVD is for everybody. We can get in everywhere. We can introduce games to an adult audience. They think that they're going to be the savior or the great hurrah for gaming through a Trojan horse, when everybody just wants a really badass game. And if they get a DVD player in the process, all the better.
I can really picture this pitch. There was surely a white, bald-headed manager kind of guy standing in front of others, all looking the same in gray suits, and they were like, "This is the idea. We'll conquer the market with that."
Yeah, I know. I told you guys in the 70s, T-shirts will never sell, but now I got the right idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things where the sad thing is there's one game on Nuon I always wanted to play, which was Tempest 3000.
Mm-hmm.
But alas, if you have to lose out on something, I mean, it could be worse.
Are there any emulators for Nuon?
I haven't found any. But there's only like 5 games for the system, so it doesn't really matter.
So no one
I
cares.
can't imagine anybody caring. No, it also could do this weird thing where you could, if the DVD supported it, you could watch a scene from like 5 different angles or something. And there's only like 2 movies that support that function. The whole thing was just ill-conceived, didn't have enough backing, and was going up against PS2. So forget about it.
Mm-hmm. Talking about PS2, Sony purchases Naughty Dog.
Naughty Dog, makers of the Crash Bandicoot series, the PlayStation 1's unofficial mascot, have been purchased by Sony. While Universal owns the rights to Crash, Naughty Dog is busy working on a new franchise for the PS2.
So, how much did they have to pay for Naughty Dog? Do you know that?
I don't know. It was a pretty penny. It definitely was a pretty penny. And unlike basically any company EA bought, Naughty Dog is still functioning as not independent, but as its own entity inside of Sony to this day. For the PS2, they would develop the Jax and Daxter series. Which would also get games on the PSP. And then for PS3, they developed Uncharted. And they're still developing the Uncharted games, amongst other titles. So Naughty Dog, is one of the premier studios inside the Sony empire and one of the major creators of IP for them. And so this just made good sense to acquire Naughty Dog. Crash wasn't as important as the creative talent behind him.
Oh yeah, and Naughty, they developed so many games. It's incredible.
Yeah, no.
Uncharted, Last of Us. It's just...
Yeah, no, they are amazing developers, and the fact that it's a studio that's been around for forever. Before this, they started out making games on PC. So they've been around for a very, very long time, and there's no end in sight to what they can produce, especially because they can focus on the Sony platform. They have the financial backing to experiment and do stuff that's a little bit different, and to give the games that extra polish that really just sets them apart.
Yeah. I was just wondering, Total Annihilation, but it was Cave Dog.
That's Cave Dog, yeah. We talked about Cave Dog.
So
that was
many
a whole
dogs.
different ball game. Yes, so many dogs.
Who let the dogs? Sorry.
Oh, that was terrible. That was painful.
Yeah, sorry, but it has to.
It had to happen. I know.
Yeah, it had to happen.
I know.
All right, moving on. Infogrames gets Dungeons and Dragons license.
Hasbro, the toy maker owner of the D&D license, has awarded the right to make D&D-based games to Infogrames. Black Isle and SSI, the current license holders, will be able to continue making games until their licenses expire, but this may be the end of the golden era of computer RPGs heralded by Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment.
What did Infogrames do with the Dungeons and Dragons license?
Well, the first game that they released was Pools of Radiance, which was a continuation of the original Pools of Radiance, which was the first gold box game. So the first proper licensed D&D computer game. That was actually done by Beyond Software, Don Daglow's company. We did an interview with him, and I actually just recorded a new interview with him last night, which will be out in a few months. Of course, always early as Patreon exclusive. And so, they did that game. They did a bunch of other stuff with it as well, but they never really captured that lightning in a bottle that BioWare, the studio that developed the Baldur's Gate games, was able to bring to the franchise. And I mean, the depth of character of Planescape Torment, that also never really gets reproduced. Now, granted, being unshackled from D&D kind of was a good thing because BioWare then goes on to make the Dragon Age series and Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect and creates their own worlds. But the D&D license is going to go through a bunch of different hands over the next few years. And it never quite has the cachet again that it had with Baldur's Gate. There's a reason why Baldur's Gate 3 now came out 20 plus years later after the original game, because there's just this demand to have that old school game back. It was such a once really in a lifetime moment of the perfect technology meeting the perfect design meeting the perfect license.
It's just perfect. But I'm really thinking, I mean, there are a lot of games following the D&D rules or the D&D in general, but they are not built upon the D&D license. And I'm really trying to remember any game being built on the D&D license that I enjoyed, and I can't think of any.
Well, again, you're a little young to have played the gold box games, the SSI gold box games. You're a little young even to have played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2.
Yeah, I haven't played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2.
So those games, I mean, like I said, that was like that golden age. Interplay, I believe right after this also releases their free their Descent engine based dungeon crawler. There's a bunch of games using it, and then of course Dungeons and Dragons Online, and there's been a ton of Dungeons and Dragons related games on cell phones. You know, all the free to play type of stuff that's also using the license. But you're right, it's been quite a while since anybody has done a truly breakout title. Especially a single-player adventure game where you control the entire party going through an adventure. It's been a long time. I mean, and it's largely also because they haven't been using the settings properly. The online game used the Eberron setting that very few people really cared about. There hasn't been a proper Forgotten Realms game. There hasn't been a Dragonlance game since the SSI days. Ravenloft also hasn't been touched in forever. So there's a lot of potential for games in that license, and I don't know why it hasn't been picked up. I just honestly couldn't tell you. Maybe because the developers don't want to waste the money on the license and then not control it and have it taken away from you. Yeah, if you can just develop your own, then you also control it. Like, I'm sure BioWare could have done a Baldur's Gate 3 back in the day or an Icewind Dale 3. And instead, now we don't have the license. Now we can't do the game. So it makes sense that you don't want to rely on somebody else's license.
Yeah. True that. Moving on, Turbine gets former Origin talent.
Jeffrey Anderson, former executive producer at Origins in charge of UO and UO2, has been brought on as CEO of Turbine Entertainment. The company would become an MMO powerhouse with games such as Asheron's Call, Lord of the Rings Online, and D&D Online.
I've actually played Lord of the Rings Online, thinking about it.
Wow, really? Okay.
Yes.
Did you enjoy it?
Not really. The thing is, I'm not into into MMOs. It always comes with the pressure if you want to do it properly, and if you just want to give it a go, you can play a single player game, and that's it.
Yeah,
and
I hear you.
And I was too young I haven't played it in 2001. I was 11, and we had a crappy internet connection until
the game
2018.
The game won't come out for many, many years.
Yeah.
Anderson is going to be at Turbine for quite a while. He's going to be developing these games over several years. Asheron's Call is going to be their first major release in 2001 or 2002. I can't remember, somewhere in that area. And then, of course, it's an MMO, so there's constantly updates and blah, 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 blah. So, Turbine really flourishes under his leadership as CEO.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because he's coming out of the experience of launching Ultima Online, the first really big, successful MMO, if you will. And the fact that he's not staying at Origin and staying at EA, I don't know it for sure, but I'm going to guess it has something to do with the fact that EA is not really pushing forward. EUO2 is going to get canceled here pretty quick. Third Dawn, the sort of half update to UO, adding 3D models, is a half measure at best. And they're not going to be pushing the envelope forward. So the fact that he left is a sign that UO2 is about to get the axe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well. And
it's really interesting how certain people just shape entire companies.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Nice transition.
Yes, exactly. Sierra management gets further shakeup.
David Grenowitzki, and I think I'm pronouncing that right, president of Sierra, has seen his vice president of marketing replaced without notice as Havas. The company's French parent continues to assert more control. Nicolas Longano is now in charge of game marketing. He would stay in the biz for a while and be a founding member of Brash Entertainment, a company we no doubt will discuss in the future.
Will we?
Yeah, Brash is going to have an interesting history too. So it's a company we will definitely mention at some point in the future. But yeah, Grenowitzki is basically overseeing the dismantling of Sierra. And it's not real any fault of his. It's just Sierra's getting dismantled because Havas is kind of a chaotic mess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not deep enough in the industry, or my knowledge of this industry of Sierra especially isn't deep enough to be able to judge.
Well, I mean, if you listen to my interview with Ken Williams, you'll get at least a big chunk of this story. Yeah. And then you can also check out some of our past episodes where we've talked about how Havas purchased the Sierra assets, started to dismantle the company, sold off the original buildings to Codemasters, and now Havas is this weird media conglomerate that I believe originally started out as a bottled water company or something of that nature. And they have been purchasing so many different media companies that they don't really know what to do with any of it. They don't have a game development culture, and they're just shuffling people around. And yeah, it just can't end well.
No, but you know what you should do if you don't know what to do?
What do you do?
Buy some paint. Havas becomes Vivendi.
Havas Interactive, the French conglomerate that has bought up such publishers as Blizzard, Sierra, Cocktail Vision, and more, has changed its name to Vivendi Universal Interactive Publishing.
Jesus.
The new The new organization will have 5 market segments: games, educational software, literature, health, and information.
So they wanted their name to be it's just 4. Sorry. Oh Lord.
Yeah. So like I said, they have so many different disparate elements. And I mean, Blizzard is part of this at this point. I mean, Blizzard is still a behemoth of game publishing with Diablo 2 and the World of Warcraft 3 on the way and so forth. It's just mind-boggling that all these brands and all this IP is stuck under this umbrella that has no idea what to do with any of it.
Yeah.
And
they just had way too much money, dude. .com is the
.com boom is basically, like I said, it's crashing. And as we've seen with so many other companies over the last couple of months, where it's like desperation moves and mergers and stuff. All of this, these are all houses of cards that are going to come crumbling down.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Speaking about things crumbling down, there's no game design degree for you.
A proposal for a game design major at University of California at Irvine, has been shot down. Apparently, the idea of the low culture of video gaming isn't ready for academia.
Yeah, the nerds aren't old enough yet, or what was the reason?
It was one of those ideas that you wouldn't be taken seriously if you were studying this. Now, the guy who put forward this proposal, he would go on to actually develop the first proper video game program, and that's Robert Nidifer. I think I'm probably mispronouncing it. There's a link to him in the show notes. And since then, obviously, a ton of universities around the world offer game development degrees. So it has become an area of study. It has become something that you can prepare for in an academic setting. But yeah, this is still in its infancy when you think about just how old the industry is, but also at the same time, I mean, we see it with this set-top box. Companies keep thinking that, we can't tell people it's a game device. We have to somehow hide that it's a game device.
This is so weird.
It's so weird for us today, 20 years later, but 20 years ago, it wasn't one of those things that you led with in a conversation. What is your pastime? Oh, I play games. Now you're the loser in your mom's basement. That's still kind of the feeling at this point.
There has to be some positivity in gaming culture. Well, I mean, and again, I'm wondering. I mean, games by 2000, games are around for what, like 20, 30 years.
Well, at least 40 years. I mean, 20 years. Yeah, 20, 25 years would be. I mean, for a proper mainstay, I'd say 25 years at this point. Yeah.
So, and this is just a sign of the university landscape not being able to adapt to the actual needs of the market.
Exactly.
I mean, it was so obvious. And I mean, even after the first PlayStation, you should have seen that there is potential. This market has potential, and well-educated people are needed in order to exploit this potential. I mean, by then, the people programming games, I mean, of course, they aren't garage programmers anymore, but is there, I think they were where they were because of their interests and not because of some, job education.
Well, of course. And these are all people who learned on the go.
This is what I mean. Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're taking programming classes at a university, and I mean, I took a programming class at a university in 96, 97. And I mean, the idea of programming graphics into the interface of a game, of a program, was not part of the curriculum. I mean, I one of my assignments was, do this program that calculates how many yards a football moved. And my teacher was amazed when I didn't just do the math aspect of it, putting out a number, but I actually had little football guys moving back and forth on the field.
Yeah.
I grabbed some sprites from ABC's Monday Night Football for the Commodore 64, and I plastered them into the game, and I'm moving them back and forth on the field. And she's like, oh. And I'm like, why aren't we learning how to use graphics? Why aren't we making this audiovisual device do audiovisual stuff? And I mean, it's just one of those
science,
things.
Man, this ain't science. This is the devil's work. I mean, it's exactly like being at business school when I asked my professor, hey, why don't we do like all pool together some money and actually go to the stock market and, buy some stocks, do what some of those guys will do later for their job. And it's like, this is not part of this class. And this class was called Finance 101. And you were learning about how the stock market worked. But sure, the Black-Scholes model is surely way more interesting in real life than actually, how the stock market works.
I know. Yeah. Oh, well. And now talking about doing something
useful. No, we're talking about the real important stuff. And I think our podcast is almost at an end, and I'm wondering what the last topic will be about. Will Machinima. Dude, I practiced that silently for quite a while now, but I failed miserably. And you see, this is it. This is no real life knowledge. No knowledge that can be transferred to real life. Anyhow,
there you go.
Will Machinima democratize?
Should I just read this one?
No. I have to learn, and you can cut it out or you can leave it in. Will Machinima democratize movie making?
Democratize.
Democratize. Okay, one more time. Will Machinima democratize movie making?
Computer gaming world takes a long look at the rise of machinima, a technique of using game engines for movie making. The new Quake 3 engine promises to raise the stakes and the quality of the films. Leading the charge is Anna Kang, wife of one John Carmack. Her company, Fountainhead Entertainment, is hoping to make game engines a real cinematographic tool.
Yeah, and I have no idea. I mean, I've never heard about any of what you just talked about except for Quake 3. So,
well, this was this thing where people were using animations from in-game footage to cut together and make movies. And since not most, but a lot of these games came with editors, especially the Quake-based games. That allowed for the modding community, allowed for people to do things. You could also script what the characters were going to do. You could script animations. So, it's what if you're having the script that says, okay, now I'm going to have 50 soldiers come out of this doorway and run to an open square as part of the game. Well, why can't you just do that, place the camera in a certain position, and now record that and say that, they're marching out and have some dialogue running over it.
Yeah.
And so you're using the game engine in order to create three-dimensional scenes, and you are planning these out and then cutting them together to make movies.
Well,
probably the most famous example of this is Red versus Blue, which is done a couple years later with the Halo games. And that's basically a red soldier and a blue soldier talking to each other and doing funny stuff. But this becomes a fairly big thing. There's actually a website called machinima.com, I believe. And they end up screwing over a bunch of the creators when they move everything to YouTube and not sharing in the spoils and blah, 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 blah. But it is an interesting concept at this point because as video editing becomes a reality for home PCs, what isn't a reality yet is the digitization of video footage. It's still very, very difficult because you don't have cameras that can, or they're very expensive to have cameras that natively create digital files. And so for most people, it's still not possible to go out, film something, and then transfer it to the computer and edit it. And instead, doing something like this allows you to make science fiction films or fantasy films or whatever in a relatively cost-effective manner.
And how did they look like?
Well, they look just like the game engine. So whatever the game engine could produce, that's what the game would look like. And so, I mean, they're not wonderful looking, but given the low resolutions that you're going to be posting online at this point, and that's the method of distribution, it's not terrible. And no one cares. And you don't have to render. Remember, just like as we see nowadays with the Mandalorian and the volume stage that they're using, where the Unreal Engine is producing the backdrops in real time. The fact that you don't have to wait 10 hours for a 30-second scene to render, like with a Pixar film, means that it becomes far more possible for people to realize things, to create a finished product, even if it doesn't look great. It's happening in real time. You can get it done. And if it didn't turn out, you just change a factor and now run the video again. And it takes you as long as the scene takes, but you don't have to wait forever for the render to happen.
Yeah. You know, for some weird reason, and this is why I asked how it looked like. For some weird reason, I'm thinking of the old Beast Wars series. Cartoons.
That's a few years earlier, and not that many years earlier, but a few years earlier, and it was terrible. Terrible looking stuff.
I mean, as a kid, I loved it. I totally loved it.
Of course. Yeah. And Reboot before that. So, yeah. Okay, but that brings us to the end of the show. Peter, what's the word of the day?
The word of the day is success.
Success. Oh, I love it. Excellent.
I want to go for success because there's no company going broke today. Well,
no, that is very true. I mean, Vivendi's on the way out, but yeah, sure.
But still, yet.
Yet. Excellent. Okay. Success is the word of the day. Remember, everybody, you can find links to our social media, to the Patreon account, and everything in the show notes. And if you want to send us an email, that's down there as well. We always look forward to your comments, suggestions, feedback, bitching and moanings, whatever you want to send us, go for it. And we'll see you again next week when we go back 40 years to look at May of 1981.
Bye.
Bye.